The HTS rebel group expands its control in the Syrian capital Damascus as it gains a foothold in key security sectors.
A massive beer bar has opened in North Korea's capital of Pyongyang.
The Hayat Tahrir al-Sham group is continuing to consolidate its power over Syria. The rebel group has now taken control of Damascus police. It's currently working in a very limited capacity as it has no legal framework to work by or laws to enforce. The HTS is set to be working on creating new nationwide laws, but in the meantime, the capital's police are only able to take complaints from the public and provide them with verbal assurances. The former head of Idlib police, the stronghold region of the ruling rebels, has been appointed to oversee the capital stations. Meanwhile, in the western coastal city of Latakia, the interim government is hosting a new reconciliation program for former soldiers. Soldiers and police officers under al-Assad were invited to come to a center and register for a new special identity card. The cards are valid for 3 months and grant their holders freedom of work and movement in the country. The interim government says all former security personnel who did not participate in the killing or torturing of civilians were granted immunity. They say the new program is an opportunity for them to seek rehabilitation and adapt to life in a new, safe, and united Syria.
All roads leading to Syria pass through Ankara. Turkey, one of the biggest winners of regime change in Syria, has indirect military presence in the country and supported the rebels who seized power last week. This gives Ankara good access to Syria's new leaders as well as international recognition as a major player in the country's affairs. From US Secretary of State Antony Blinken to European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, Western leaders are visiting Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan to discuss latest developments in Syria.
From the perspective of the EU and President von der Leyen, what choice do you have? The reality is that today, Turkey is the main outside power broker inside Syria. And if you want to have any influence on events there, you have to work through Turkey.
On Monday, a senior EU diplomat had already made first contact with the provisional government set up in Syria by HTS. But for Brussels, it is important to use Ankara's influence to facilitate a smooth transition that guarantees the unity of the country and respect for all minorities.
If you listen to Turkey, they are ready to play a big role. They are in favor of tolerance, as we are, as Europeans, of course. They are in favor of territorial integrity, as we are. But in the case of Turkey, remember that they have lots of troops in the northern part of Syria. So how this will unfold, we don't know yet. And also, in Syria, we have the remnants of Islamic State. So security there is very important.
But in northern Syria, there is not just a Turkish buffer zone controlled by the Syrian National Army, but also a significant area under the control of Kurdish groups, which are supported by the US. And Ursula von der Leyen will try to avoid a new confrontation.
She will not want Turkey and particularly the Turkish-aligned rebel militias inside Syria to aggressively pursue military confrontation with the Kurdish militias, which is another way of saying she will want Turkey to help create a unified Syrian country and not start another civil war to pursue in another theater the ongoing Turkish military operation against Kurdish rebels, both inside Turkey, inside Iraq, and today, occasionally also inside Syria.
There is also the issue of refugees. Considered not enough by Ankara, Turkey has received some financial assistance in the past from the EU and a promise for an additional 1 billion euros to host Syrian refugees. Now Ankara wants to send them back, and this will require stability in the region.
The European Commission launched formal proceedings against TikTok on Tuesday over a potential breach in the Digital Services Act during Romania's presidential election. Nationalist and Eurosceptic candidate Calin Georgescu unexpectedly won the first round, despite being little known to the public. The election was annulled after the Constitutional Court received evidence of Russian interference in the voting process.
La démocratie ne peut que bien se développer s'il n'y a pas de manipulation. Le citoyen libre doit pouvoir s'exprimer librement et s'il est induit en erreur par des algorithmes qui ne fonctionnent pas ou d'autres moyens de manipulation qui aujourd'hui semblent avoir cours sur les plateformes, c'est inacceptable. Alors il faut les combattre avec les moyens dont dispose la loi.
TikTok is accused of not adequately mitigating risks linked to the integrity of Romania's election. The Commission's concerns relate to how the social media's recommendation algorithm works and the system of political advertisements, which require labeling. If found non-compliant with EU law, TikTok could face a fine of up to 6% of its global revenue.
Russia's security service says a 29-year-old Uzbekistan citizen has been detained over the killing of Igor Kirilov, a top Russian general. Kirilov was killed outside an apartment building on Tuesday after an explosion from a device hidden in an electric scooter. The SBU, Ukraine Security Service, claimed responsibility for Kirilov's death on Tuesday. He was in charge of the Russian military's nuclear, biological, and chemical protection forces. Deputy Chairman of the Russian Security Council Dmitry Medvedev vowed to retaliate against Kyiv.
Но в любом случае правоохранительные органы должны найти убийц в России, и нужно сделать все, чтобы уничтожить заказчиков, которые находятся в Киеве. Заказчики эти тоже известны, это военно-политическое руководство Украины.
UN spokesman Stefan Dujarric urged all parties involved to exercise restraint. Meanwhile, the U.S. government says they were not informed or involved in Kirilov's assassination.
It's not something that we were involved in. Obviously, he was a general who was involved in a number of atrocities. He was involved in the use of chemical weapons against Ukrainian military. It's something the United States has publicly assessed before.
Russia has denied using any chemical weapons in Ukraine and in turn has accused Kyiv of using toxic agents in combat.
Oil stains washed up for tens of kilometers along the shore in Russia's southern Krasnodar. That is according to the region's governor. He said 260 people were deployed to handle with the aftermath, such as by cleaning the beach covered in black liquid. It came after a storm damaged 2 Russian oil tankers over the weekend, one of which broke in half and sunk. The submerged vessel was estimated to have spilled 3,700 tons of mazout into the sea, which is a low-quality heavy fuel oil. Last week, the European Union issued new sanctions against Russia and their so-called shadow fleet, which consists of old, uninsured tankers to circumvent Western restrictions. The European Union and the shipping industry previously expressed their concerns over Russia's use of the poorly maintained vessels, as they pose significant environmental as well as safety threats.
An overnight curfew has been put in place in Mayotte starting Tuesday evening in the aftermath of Cyclone Chido. Dozens have died after the worst storm in nearly a century hit the French overseas territory in the Indian Ocean. Aid efforts continue as French military aircraft continue to deliver food and water daily. An airbase on the nearby Réunion Island is being used as a staging post for emergency relief supplies. Nearly 70% of Mayotte's population has been gravely affected, with entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble. The island's main hospital remains severely damaged, and a field hospital is expected to arrive on Thursday. French President Emmanuel Macron has pledged to visit Mayotte soon and to declare a national mourning period. A landmark beer bar has opened in North Korea's capital of Pyongyang. This government-issued propaganda-style footage shows the massive Western-style establishment that was built in one of the city's new districts. Visitors can buy the country's trademark beer, Taedonggang, which comes from a brewery the government purchased from England and reassembled in North Korea in 2002.
여기 리문고리에 자리 잡은 화성대동강 맥주집은 우리 이민들이 보다 문명한 생활을 누리게 하시려는 경리하는 청소동지 사랑 속에 세워졌습니다.
While Pyongyang advertises a rich North Korean beer culture, it remains a drink reserved for the elite. Most of North Korea's largely rural population struggles daily with poverty and food insecurity. People must exchange food vouchers in order to buy beer, and most can't afford to sacrifice the small amount they can spend on food. Only in Pyongyang, men are exclusively given special beer vouchers. In the countryside, people must rely on low-quality home brews. Because of these limitations, high-end beer houses like this one will likely only be frequented by Pyongyang's elite and a small number of international tourists.
An injured cave explorer in northern Italy was carried to safety on Wednesday, 75 hours after she fell while attempting to map an unexplored branch of the Bueno Fonteno cave. Italian alpine rescuers strapped the 32-year-old Ottavia Piana into a stretcher that reached the cave's mouth in the early morning hours. It was her second time in 17 months to be rescued from the cave near Lago de Iseo, northeast of Bergamo. Piana suffered multiple fractures when she fell 5 meters. Nearly 160 technicians from 13 Italian regions assisted the rescue.